The building behind us is the Barrett Green Armory. It was constructed just shortly before the outbreak of the First World War. It's where the 26th Battalion, when it was first formed up in November of 1914, was stationed before they departed for overseas. So the troops that were raised for the battalion came from all over New Brunswick, a lot of them from St. John, but other places all across the province. There was a fairly large contingent from Prince Edward Island. There were Nova Scotians. There were even a few Americans in the ranks of the original battalion, but predominantly it was New Brunswick's battalion. So they spent the first 6 months organizing, training, preparing to depart for Fort Britain for additional training. So the troops would have been recruited here, would have joined up here at the armory. They also lived here during that time. Yeah, Lieutenant Harry Ferguson was one of the originals. He was from Campbellton, New Brunswick. He was, even though he was only 25 years old when he joined up, he was still a relatively accomplished young man. He and his brother owned a men's clothing store in Campbellton.
Saturday, June 12, 1915. We paraded for embarkation at 6 p.m. The crowds that lined every street we passed were immense and broke our lines again and again by closing in on us to say goodbyes to their friends. Besides our fife and drum band, we had 3 brass bands from the city who played till about 9 while we were lined up along the wharf. Lieutenant Harry Ferguson.
This is where the march of the 26th, which had started up at the armory, finally ended when they arrived here at the wharf where the Caledonia was tied up. So they marched back and forth through the streets of St. John and came in this direction here and then down Duke Street and across water through to this area. And in the meantime, all of the people who had been following the March of the 26th spilled out into Duke Street and completely filled the space for probably a block or so back up Duke. And then they cordoned off the area and allowed the troops, once they'd gotten settled, to then come forward and mingle with the crowd to say their last farewells before it turned dark and the crowd began to disperse and the troops were settled in the freight sheds in this area for the night.
Sunday, June 13th, 1915. Up at 5 a.m. this morning, feeling stiff and sore from sleeping on a crack all night. I really only slept 3 hours altogether. When we cast off our moorings at 11:30 a.m., the entire wharf and waterfront for nearly half a mile was literally jammed with people, not to mention dozens and dozens of tugs and small boats circling about in the water around us. As I scanned the crowd, I could see many a red nose and watery eyes due to excessive use of handkerchiefs, and all sorts of farewells were waved, thrown, and kissed. It is an inspiring sight, the crowded wharfs and the ship lined everywhere with khaki uniforms, away up to the top riggings, the bands playing, whistles blowing, cheering and yelling in a most amazing uproar. The boats about us followed us out until our speed left them behind. Lieutenant Harry Ferguson.
This is the monument that was put up to commemorate the departure of the 26th on board the Caledonia on June 13th, 1915. About 10 years after the end of the war, the 26th Battalion established a battalion association for veterans of the unit. They chose June 13th as the date on which they met every year for the next 70 years. They met well into the 1980s before most of the members had died by then, and they finally stopped meeting. So June 13th is a very significant date for the province.